Sometimes when you're trying to get to where you're trying to get, it's just better off just to appear. Hello, boys and girls. Sure is good to see you again. What is today? It's Wednesday. As you can see, I've been traveling quite a lot, telling my stories and spreading the good word, as it were. What are we going to talk about today? Let's talk about today the story of Utgarda-Loki. In case you haven't heard of it, Utgarda-Loki. In case you haven't heard of it, let me find my place real quick. I might have to get them readers they were talking about. That's going to be big someday. Yeah, right there. The story of Utgarda-Loki. One day, Loki and Thor were traveling on their way to Jotunheim, and that's the land of the giants. They were on their way to Jotunheim. Specifically, they were looking for a place, a fortress, a stronghold called Utgard. At Utgard, they had a diplomatic mission to go and achieve. And on their way passing, they found their way to a farm. And on this farm lived a family of 4. It was Röskva, the young girl, Þjálfi, the young boy, their father Egil, and his wife. And on this farm, out between the lands, between man and giant, is nothing but wilderness. Wild things and creatures everywhere. And so Þjálfi found himself always running. He found himself trying to stay safe, survive, and be as boys are. I know when I was younger, I'd like to go find myself a bear, throw a rock at him, and run. Obviously, I can't do that anymore. But that was one of Þjálfi's favorite things to do. So he could run like no man could. He ran like the wind. And one day, Loki and Thor appeared on their farm. And the family sees them. It's been a long, hard year. Sometimes farmers just can't provide like they need to because weather, because so many different reasons. And this was one of those years. It was a hard harvest for Þjálfi and Egil and their family. And during this time, the custom was invite in your guests. Always provide them with sustenance if you can, with drink, with food. Offer them a place to stay for the night, especially a weary traveler. And when you are happened upon it by a god, you just know it. So when the massiveness that is Thor appears before Egil, and he has to look this god of strength and thunder in the eye, and he says, I'm sorry, I cannot offer you enough food, but what we do have I will offer. Thor and Loki exchange glances because, well, what would it be for them, of them, to put these people out? So Thor said, don't worry about it. This one is on me. Or some such line. And he raises his hammer and strikes it upon one of his goats. And the goat falls dead. And he does the same thing to the next one. Snarla, Grinder are their names. And he tells this family, eat your fill. We will share this. But just eat the meat. Leave the bones. He skinned the goats and he put them over the fire. And after they were done cooking, he took a whole goat for himself because, well, they're his goats. And the rest were left to share the other. Loki takes it upon himself to have another fun. Right? And he looks upon Þjálfi. And he says, you're a growing boy. And the boy looked upon him with his green eyes and his scarred lips with terror and admiration, because here he is, another god, here before him in his house, eating with him. And he tells him, you look like a strong boy. If that were me, I'd feel pretty proud. I'd feel pretty good about that. And he says, for any strong growing boy, what you really need. Eat upon the marrow of these bones, for marrow gives us strength. It makes us our blood. It gives us our power, and nothing is more powerful than the 2 goats, these rams that pull Thor's chariot across the sky. And Þjálfi thinks to himself and saying, that's probably a good idea, right? I want to grow big and strong, and the Loki's telling me it's okay, so obviously it has to be okay. So they're eating, and Þjálfi takes a knife, cracks open his bone, and eats a bit of marrow. Now, when everyone was eating their meats and they were cleaning upon these bones, and they just piled them on top of the skins. Remember, I said Thor skinned these goats, and he laid the skins out, 2 separate skins, so you could pile the respective bones in place. Well, when Þjálfi ate the marrow, and he ate of that bone, he placed it in the bottom of the pile and made sure the other bones hid what he had done. Because even though he had Loki's permission, he still knew he had done something wrong. And he tried to hide that fact. Well, when we try to hide something that we've done wrong, almost always will we be caught. And that's exactly what happened for Þjálfi. Because the next morning, Thor lifted his hammer to the sky, and with a crack of thunder booming from deep in his chest, he lifted it from the sky and pointed at the first pile of bones and skin and said, "Be whole!" And up rose the whole of Snarla. The goat bleated and pranced and went away to pasture upon the farmland. And he did the same thing, "Be whole!" And Grindr appeared. When Grindr took his first step, he bleated as such as almost a scream, as if he were in pain, and he limped, and Thor was confused by this. What's going on? And Grindr continued on, and Thor saw Grindr's leg is broken. And of course, Thor being Thor, and was enraged, and he felt himself puff up, and he adjusted his belt of strength, said, "Who has broken of this bone? I gave you this meat. I gave you food. I asked of you one thing, and you betrayed me." So he took his hammer and he said, "I gave you this food. You betrayed me. It is up to me. I am going to destroy all of this farm and the 4 of you for betraying me." And of course, Þjálfi being Þjálfi, and he's given what he had done, he's still an honorable child. And Þjálfi says, "No! Spare my father. It wasn't him. It was me. Spare this farm. Spare my family. Take me as your bondservant. Allow me to serve you in repayment for what I have done to Grindr." Thor mulls this over, and his sister, Röskva, she stands up immediately. She's like, "Wait, take me as well. I can help. I can help with things. I can clean, I can cook, I can mend." "Okay," says Thor. "All right. Fine. You, Þjálfi, will go with us to Utgard. We have business to attend to, and I could use the extra hands. But can you keep up?" And Þjálfi immediately stands up. He's like, "I'm the fastest of men. I can keep up with you." Okay. "Röskva, you will stay here," says Thor. "You will stay here, and you will watch my rams, and you will make sure that Grindr heals well. And when we return, the 4 of us, 3 and Loki, will return to Asgard, where you shall be my servants, and you, Röskva, will be the servants of my mother." Thor's a good boy, always thinking of his mother. And so Thor and Loki and Þjálfi, they embark on their journey. Now Þjálfi is fast, the fastest of all men, as he claims, and even then, keeping up with the godlike pace of Thor and Loki on foot was difficult. So after a long day of travel, he finds himself heaving and puffing and out of breath. And Thor looks around, because, like I said, they're on their way to Jotunheim. The land of giants is frozen and frostbitten, and the air is thin in winter. And Thor looks and he's saying, oh, well, we need to find shelter for the night. Loki decides he will go find it. And it's not long before Loki returns and says, I found something. It seems to be a giant cave. We can shelter there for the night. Thor agrees. Þjálfi goes and he's ready to just lay down. And as they happen upon this cave, Thor inspects it and finds just a single hall coming off of it. This giant, less of a cave and more of a room, where they can all fit and they can do what they need to for the evening. So they break out their sacks and they look for provisions for the evening. But they don't really want to start a fire that night. It's not quite cold enough and it's fine in this cave. After a while, Thor hears and the rest feel a rumbling of the earth. Just loud, roaring sounds, as if the very ground around them was angry that they are there, and the snow blowing around was trying to tell them so. Þjálfi and Loki decide then that they're going to take shelter within the smaller antechamber, this hallway off to the side, the single room. Somehow, amidst all of the rumbling and the roaring and the shaking of the earth, Þjálfi and Loki find sleep. Thor, on the other hand, he stays awake, holding vigil at the opening of the cave, waiting for whatever roaring creature decides to show himself, hammer in hand and ready. By the end of the night, however, I don't know if you've ever gone an entire day without eating and without sleeping, but Thor was ready to thrash the next thing he saw. And he noticed as the sun was coming up, the roaring had changed. It had gone from a roar to a whistle, and it was almost melodic. You could time it. So he decided he was going to go explore, investigate, figure out, what is this? What's making this sound? It's not the wind. And so Thor leaves the cave. And upon further inspection, he comes across this hugest face he's ever seen. An entire head, massive, bigger than the castle I stand next to now. And now he knows it wasn't roaring he was hearing, it wasn't a whistling of the wind, it was a giant sleeping. And this giant sleeping was snoring and whistling throughout the night. So Thor, angry, hungry, and loves to kill giants, decides he was going to wake this thing up. So he climbs upon the beast and saddles himself, standing there, hammer raised between the eyes and ready. And as he does this, the giant wakes. He opens his frosty blue eyes. And of course, they're gonna cross, looking right in between, right at Thor. What is that? Who are you? Well, I am Thor. I am Skrimir. It means big fellow. Whichever, if you were to come into my land, you will see how much of a jest that name really is, for I am just a runt of my clan. Thor showed no confusion here. He tried not to, at least, because he didn't want to show that this, the giantest of giants that he's ever seen, was a runt in his clan. This managed to try to hide his confusion in his face, looked only like a snarl, and he came down off of Skrimir's face, and he sat up, and Thor noticed Skrimir was wearing only a single mitten. Have you seen, you must be Thor, the mighty god of thunder. I am, says Thor. Have you seen my mitten? Looks just like this one. Ah! And the giant reaches down and picks up what used to be the shelter for the evening. That's odd. There's something in here. So he turns it over and gives it a shake, and out tumble Loki, Þjálfi, and the rations. What are you? That's my mitten. and he dons his mitten. "Where are you three headed?" "We're headed to Utgard," says Þjálfi. "We're on a mission." Thor tosses him a glance of, "Come on, man," and looks up to the giant and says, "Yes, we are on our way to Utgard." He says, "Well, that's kind of on my way. Why don't you travel with me? I can carry your provisions for you and make the load easier." The three look at each other and decide, why not? It makes the load easier on us. We're headed the same way. Of course we'll be safe with something that huge. So that's what they do. They travel with Skrymir, and they travel for a day. Now, poor Þjálfi thought the pace was hard before. But here he finds himself trying to keep up with not only the two gods, but he's trying to keep up with the pace of a giant. The hugest giant he's ever seen or heard of. Loki and Thor, they struggle to keep up with the pace, and here they go traveling for an entire day at this pace by the time they reach their next frozen stopping area. Trying and trying as he might, Þjálfi just can't catch his breath. But it's not as difficult as it was yesterday. And he notices each day they travel, he gets a little better at it and a little faster. And another day, they stop, and Þjálfi says, "It's been a long day." And the giant Skrymir agrees. He's like, "It has been a long day. I think I'm gonna go straight to sleep," says Skrymir. "Feel free, your rations are in my bag as always. Feel free to help yourselves." And immediately he lays down and the roaring and whistling start again. Þjálfi looks up at the giant's bag, and as Thor climbs upon it, and when Thor reaches the top and he's looking into the knots, he tries to untie it, and he cannot do it. Þjálfi and Loki, knowing they're not as strong as Thor, give it a try anyway. "It's as if it's made of iron. I can't open it." Thor's just ready at this point, traveling as hard as he is, not sleeping well because he won't stop snoring. He's just ready to kill something. And he decides, that's what I'm going to do. I'm going to wake this giant up, or I'm going to kill him. One of these two things. Either way, my problems are solved. And Thor goes upon and gets his spot between the giant's eyes, and again lifts his hammer, but this time gives him a blow. And when the hammer reaches the forehead, it gives off such a sound, a crack, that one that echoes across the tundra. Thor looks around. The giant hardly stirs. So he tightens his belt, Megangirth, the belt that which gives him strength. And he goes for another blow. He stands up all the way on his tippy toes and brings it down with a roar. Ah! And again another crack, which echoes across the tundra. And he finally rouses the giant. "Thor? Is that you? I think an acorn fell on my head." "Did you eat yet? I wouldn't blame you if you had or hadn't. I'm sure you're ready for sleep. I'm gonna go back to sleep now." And he does. Goes back to sleep, and Thor now is just so angry. And he's ready to do this again. Loki calls him over. And again, they spend their night warm, not fed. And the next morning, Thor's just hungry and sleepless, and he's tired of the snoring giant. Have you ever met someone who just does something so often that as soon as they do it, just... Today was the breaking point for Thor, and he climbs the giant's head again, and he takes his spot between the eyes above the bridge of the nose. And he lifts his hammer and gives another mighty blow so loud thunder echoes across the skies. But the crack and echo and tumble that we heard before, the past two blows, now sounded like the entire earth shaking and rattling. I think some bird's nest fell on my head. What was that? By the time the giant had risen, Thor had fallen off and was with the others, and, well, looks like it's morning, says Skrymir. We should continue on. And they do. And as they continue on, just before nightfall, Skrymir says, alright, Utgard is that way, due east. Continue on this path, you will come upon Utgard. You will find it easy. I'm headed north. Good luck to you all. And Skrymir undid his bag and pulled out their provisions. And off he went into the north. And the others, they traveled for a couple more days, due east. Finally, their spirits started to lift because they had access to their own food again. And they see what looked like a normal-sized fortress in the distance. And as they traveled, they realized it's not a normal-sized fortress in the distance because it's not getting any bigger as we get closer. That's a huge fortress. Way, way far away. Like when you're driving through plains and coming across the mountains, they stay so small for so long and then suddenly are so big that it's all you can see. And when they finally come across and get to this most magnificent and giant of strongholds called Utgard, they're just so weary. Their provisions went out the day before. They haven't slept well. It's cold. And they come across this massive door. But the stronghold is so big that it's meant to keep out just as large creatures. They can come through the door, no problem. Underneath, in fact. It's no big deal. Once they enter the hall, they enter the stronghold and they enter the hall and they come upon a feast. These benches were as tall as treetops, and upon them, giants, of course. And there, at the end of the hall, sat the king. And the king beckoned them. You three! Who are you? Welcome to Utgard. Everyone here is welcome. But everyone here is the best at something. What can you do? And they all look at each other and said, Loki steps forward and says, well, I can eat like no one else can eat. You can eat? Well, we should see that, shouldn't we? Good thing it's already a feast going. Hey! And he beckons across, and out were brought two massive wooden troughs. And he said, okay, Loki, I am Utgarda-Loki. It would appear we are kin. I knew your parents. I knew Þjálfi. I knew your parents. You will start on that end, and you will meet Logi. The two of you, whoever can eat the fastest from end to end, wins. Simple as that. Loki shrugged, as if he didn't care either way. Go! And immediately, in a storm of furious movements of his hands, Loki devoured from end to end. And when he looked up, he saw that he had reached the end at the same time as Logi. Utgarda-Loki, the king of the giants, laughed and bellowed. What a wonderful showing! I have never seen anybody eat as fast as Logi before. What a wonderful trick. However, Loki, it was great as you did. I see you left behind the bones. Where Logi here ate the bones and even the trough. Loki stared in astonishment, never having been beaten in an eating contest before, and took his spot next to the sides of Þjálfi and Thor again. Well, what can you do, boy? Þjálfi looked sheepishly, wondering what he can do, and he said, well, I'm fast. Fast! Fast for a man among giants? What is that? Alright. If you are the best, you can stay. The three of you can stay. let's go outside. So outside they go. And outside they find themselves at the foot of a track. Beautiful flat land and a track carved out of the ice and the grass. Well, a foot race just wouldn't be fair. Boy, you will race him. This is Huyi. And Huyi was barely bigger than a man. Obviously still a giant, but looked enough like Utgarda-Loki that he wondered if Huyi was some relation to Utgarda-Loki. And they looked at the track and they knew one lap is all it would take. So they lined up, and as he looked again at his opponent, Huyi seemed to almost shimmer. "Go!" cried Utgarda-Loki, and off they went. Huyi was like a blur. But Þjálfi ran and ran, didn't give up as hard as he could. When he finally crossed the line, he was out of breath and panting, like he has been. Out of breath and panting, and Utgarda-Loki, as he does, was bellowing his jovial laughter that just couldn't help but make you smile from deep in his gut. And Þjálfi says, "I can do it again." Trying to catch his breath. And he says, "Alright, you want to try it again, boy? Try it again." So again, Huyi and Þjálfi lined up. Again they raced, and again Þjálfi lost. "Let's try this," said Utgarda-Loki. "Instead of running a full lap, just run to that tree there." It's probably about a quarter of the distance. Because Þjálfi and Utgarda-Loki knew that Þjálfi could sprint and get to the short distance faster than the sustained run. Okay, let's give it a try. "I've got you this time," said Þjálfi. Huyi just smiled at him, and again, "Go!" Utgarda-Loki shouts. And they take off. And Huyi ran, and he ran like no man has ran before. So fast, his feet were a blur, and the dirt behind him kicked up in huge plumes up and over his head. And even before he was halfway, Huyi was done. He couldn't believe it. He'd been beaten. This frustration and anger built up in him so hard, he ran even further and faster. But he still lost. Out of breath now, he joined his place between Thor and Loki. "Well, Loki went, your boy Þjálfi went, and you, mighty Thor," said Utgarda-Loki. "Hasn't been much of a show so far. So far you don't deserve to be in my home. What can you do?" Thor now, filling with rage at the words of Utgarda-Loki, "I can drink." "You can drink." "Let us see you drink." So they go back into the hall, and Utgarda-Loki takes his seat upon the top table and beckons for the three to join him. When they join him, Utgarda-Loki summons up, "Bring me my horn." And he was given the hugest of horns. And when he handed it to Thor, Thor looked upon it, and it was almost as if the end of the horn couldn't be seen. And as Thor inspected the horn, Utgarda-Loki tells him, it's like, everyone in this hall can drink this horn. Most of them can do it in a single gulp. A few, admittedly, a few require a second drink. But there is no one in my home so shameful that they require a third draw. Thor, of course, accepted his challenge, took a big breath, and tilted the horn to his face and drank deeply, drank as a god drinks, until his breath gave out. And when he looked down, had gone no further than just the width of his thumb. He was astonished. Surely there was more than that. Surely I drank more than that. Utgarda-Loki just smiled and said, like I said, some lesser men need 2 draughts. Thor, murder in his eyes, took another breath, hefted his belt, and drank, gulped and gulped. So much so that Loki and Þjálfi stared like there's no way there could be anything left in this. Thor himself even knew, I drank and I drank. This should be empty by now. It's still coming. His breath gave out. And it had only gone down another knuckle's worth. That just simply won't do, thought Thor. And without prompting from the king again, Thor lifted it to his mouth and drank again. So deeply did he drink, so loudly did he slurp, it echoed through the horn. This time, thought Thor, I've got this, I've got... Still, the salty, cold, giant's mead remained in the horn. Thor just stared at it. Guess you're not as good a drinker as you thought. What could you expect? Look at how small you are. That's a horn for giants. But, mighty Thor, let us give you a test of strength. I can do that, surely, thought Thor. I bet you couldn't pick up my cat, said Utgarda-Loki to Thor. Now, his eyes burned with rage, and they almost shone, glowing red. Pick up your cat? Yes, I can pick up your cat! You may be king here, but do not insult me, Utgarda-Loki. Not even the ends of his smile quivered, as Thor, growing on, insulted in another man's home. Fine, let us see you lift my cat. So the Utgarda-Loki takes the 3 travelers into another room, and there is the most giant of cats. As big as a house was this cat. Thor tightens his belt again, as he does before he's about to do something we all think is stupid. And he approaches this cat that looks at him bored. You can't do this, says the cat's eyes. And Thor wraps his arms as far as he could around the cat, then tries underneath, then tries a leg, then tries a couple different things. He's like, I'm just seeing, to Utgarda-Loki, he tells. And he finds a grip that he thinks would be the best, after trying a few, like I said. And he's shaking, and he's trembling, and his knees are wavering, and he tries, and he lifts the cat, and the cat decides he's going to help him out and goes to his knees. And then Thor lifts the cat. But not quite all the way. Only 1 foot, single foot, comes off the ground. And as he does that, 1 foot comes off the ground, and there's almost this sound. Another earthquake, gone in the distance. Stop, said Utgarda-Loki. You can't do it. You've tried. Put the cat down. You want a test of strength, Thor? How about a wrestling match? Utgarda-Loki tries. I'll wrestle anyone here. I'll wrestle you. It wouldn't be fair for you to wrestle me, the king of the giants. No. How about a giant closer to your size? In fact, you can wrestle my old foster mother. Thor is just ready to kill every giant in this room at this point. An old woman? I can't fight an old woman. Oh, this isn't just any woman. This woman is the one that taught me how to wrestle. Surely, even in her old age, she's got a move or two. Surely, she could put up a fight for you. And surely, mighty Thor, you were not afraid. And so, he calls in his old mother. And she walks in just frail and gray and withered, hair wispy and white. And Utgarda-Loki says, "This is Ellie, my foster mother." Thor looks at this wizened old woman, older than me, and says, "This wouldn't be fair. What is that?" And the woman stood there, and Thor just testing himself, testing her. While telling Utgarda-Loki this wouldn't be fair, he shoves the old woman. But the old woman, Ellie, does not move, doesn't budge. Utgarda-Loki just smiles. "Are you sure?" Thor tries again. A shove, a push, a trip, a kick, whatever he could think of. This god of wrestling and strength and thunder cannot get this old woman to budge. Until finally, Ellie reaches out a single crooked finger and taps him gently on his thigh. And instantly, he felt his knee grow weaker. What is this? So he grabs the old woman and puts her in a hold over his shoulder, and she embraces him. And when she embraces him, he feels every bit of strength leave his body. He feels himself wither. He feels himself crumble. So he fights harder and he tries to stand, and all she manages to do is take him down to one knee. Utgarda-Loki says, "It's over. You can't even wrestle an old woman. Pick up a cat, drink a horn of mead, win a foot race, or even eat." The three of them filled with shame and anger. And Utgarda-Loki says, "You did do one thing. I haven't laughed this much in a long time, and you three clowns are welcome a single night in my fortress." So they were invited to the feast, and they could stay a night, and as defeated men do, spoke a lot less than normal, even when plied with drink. The mead this time, however, wasn't as salty as the first time, as Thor remembered. It was sweeter, wasn't as cold, all around better. So at least something was a win for this evening for Thor. In the next morning, Utgarda-Loki walked them out of his stronghold, out of his fortress, and he said, "So, how did you find Utgard last night? What did you think?" "Well," Loki said, "I thought I could eat. I thought I could run," said Þjálfi. And Thor said nothing. And again, Utgarda-Loki gave his belly laugh. "The three of you, I tricked you!" Everything last night was illusion. In fact, everything before last night was illusion. Loki just stared at him. You see, that wasn't a normal giant, Loki. Logi. Have you ever seen wildfire? What it does to a forest? Logi is fire incarnate. He can eat everything in his wake faster than anything else, anyone else. And you, boy, Þjálfi, how fast can you think? I can think. Can you think faster than you can run? Yeah, you have to think to move your feet. Yes, Huyi is thought. He arrives where he needs to be before he's even left, and he's gone before it's thought about. And me? Said Thor eagerly. What did I actually do? Utgarda-Loki took a breath and sighed, and he looked at the three of them and nodded and said, had I known last night what I now know, you three would have never found my fortress. You three would never have been invited in and shown what you were allowed to see last night. For Thor, you could not see the end of that horn because the end of it went into the deepest depths of the ocean. And because of what you drank, that was not mead, but the very sea water itself. You drank so much that there is now tides. And forever, the waters of the world will ebb and flow because of your drinking. That cat was no mere cat, was illusion. That cat was Jormungandr, the Midgard serpent. It encases all of Midgard, its tail in its mouth. And what you did was loosen it. That much closer to freedom is the serpent. And the woman? The woman is the most dangerous of all, Thor. That woman, Ellie, was old age. And for you to have wrestled old age and only go down to one knee, you're far stronger than I could have imagined. And Loki, with fury and admiration and respect in his eyes twinkling, he looked up at Utgarda-Loki and he said, you said illusion before we even arrived. What do you mean? You know the giant you traveled with? Asked Skrymir. Asked Utgarda-Loki. Well, that was Skrymir. He told the three of them. Skrymir was me. With illusion. I made myself look bigger than I actually am. And you, he pointed to Thor. Mighty Thor. He said now with fury in his voice. You, see that mountain over there? And the three of them looked, and there was a mountain in the distance that had 3 square-shaped holes and valleys cut from it. And he said, I used illusion because I knew just a single blow from your hammer would have killed me. I put that mountain between my head and your hammer. Those 3 blows are what you would have done to my face. And look, I can't lose this. Because I know now what I do, and I see how dangerous and powerful you are, mighty Thor, God of thunder, bane of giants. You will never find this place again. In fact, and Thor rose his hammer before the next word could come, and as his hammer fell down, Utgarda-Loki and all of Utgard was gone. Nothing but the tundra and mist and ice as far as you could see. And Loki couldn't help but smile, and he chuckled. And that's why anytime that you find yourself at odds with another person, and you found yourself, maybe you're growing, maybe you learn something from them, maybe about them, and you cut them out of your lives, we use the term Utgard because they've been cut from your life and they won't be welcome back in. This is a healthy practice for your safety, for your health, for whatever it may be. If someone doesn't treat you right or is dangerous to you, it's okay to leave them and not let them back in. And that's what Utgarda-Loki did for his people, did for himself. Sure was nice telling you another story on this beautiful Wednesday. I hope to see you again real soon.